me, Jay Powell, and our amazing guest, Daniel James Greenway. Thank you for joining us, mate. First of all, just a little, check in, see how you're doing, how you're feeling today. What's been the overriding emotion for today for you?
Today has been a very busy day, to the point where I felt like not overwhelmed. I didn't get to a point of being overwhelmed, but I had to stay focused, to stay like on top of everything that needed doing today. But it's been good. I feel like I've accomplished, which is good.
Was knowing that you had this at the end of the day of an extra stress, just like you knew you had something else to do.
It's fine. You know me. I was literally on a Clubhouse conversation just before this, so I'm happy to talk. I'm always happy to talk.
Good, man. Yes, and that's part of the reason why I asked you to join today. Is we have been having lots of chats on Clubhouse, and you've been really involved, and it's always refreshing how, we can talk about that later, about the subject matters that we've been speaking about. But it's been a great tool, hasn't it? I know that you've made much more than me, made lots of friends on there, making new friends, right?
Yeah, it's weird. I was having this conversation the other day. I was like, they are my friends, but they're also not my friends. Like, they are very much like people that I'm really enjoying getting to know, but then also it's like a weird disconnected reality, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, of course, but we always have that.
Beautiful.
With new formats, new social medias. I think that we have that a lot, right?
Yeah, no, definitely. And it's been great, especially like internationally, to hear so many different perspectives on situations. And I feel like we often get very one track mind about like certain topics of conversation, because that's our experience within one country. And it's been really cool to talk to people throughout the world, literally throughout the world, about so many different things. And I definitely feel like some of them will become very good friends of mine. It's just it's like a weird little sub community and climate, isn't it? It's like an ecosystem of itself.
Yeah, and then it's like making that integration into the close knit. It takes a little push, I think, or something. It is interesting, because I've spoke to people internationally on Clubhouse also. For those who don't know, who are listening, don't know what Clubhouse is. It's just an currently invite-only app, which is not very invite-only. We've both got plenty of invites.
We're both there, so.
Exactly. And we've got plenty of invites, so if you want to join, then just let me know. Where it's just like audio rooms, and people format them, host rooms however they want. And I've spoken and listened in quite a few mental health rooms. And it is interesting, like the opinions and approach to like mental health is different. I feel from overseas. Maybe it's because they like therapy is more accepted, and like it's part of culture over there. I don't know. There's lots of differences. Some good, some bad. Well, not good or bad, just different in pros and cons from my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely.
But less about Clubhouse, more about Daniel James Greenway. So people know when they're watching back and listening back to this, to get a better idea of how you formed your opinions, how you came to be. We're just going to start with your origin story, Dan, and just about like, where you came from, where you were brought up, what the family life was like when you decided to, follow the career that you chose, and how that progressed, and where you're now. Anything at all that you feel that is relevant would be really helpful, and I'm sure there'll be lots of things we can dive into from there.
Okay, great. So I am 29. So I was born in 1991 in the quiet little town of Newport Pagnell, which everybody thinks is in Wales, and it's not. It's just outside of Milton Keynes, Buckinghamshire. I was raised by 2 teachers, and I'm the youngest of 3 boys. So that's just a little bit in terms of the environment that I grew up in. The youngest of 3, very active, very get up and go. Like, my family was just incredibly active throughout my entire life. My parents used to run the Sea Scouts, so I spent my summers on lakes, and I feel very lucky about the way in which I was raised.
Is Sea Scouts different to regular Scouts?
Yeah, so it's basically like regular Scouts, but just on water. So we'd be like kayaking and sailing and canoeing and all sorts of things. Like windsurfing. If you name like a water activity, I'm pretty sure I would have done it at some point in a freezing lake in the Lake District.
Water polo?
Yeah, all of it. Like it's just it's yeah, it was great. It was really, really great. I think I do not take that for granted at all. I come from a very stable family, and by that I just mean as in like my family is very together. My parents have been married for 41 years now, but obviously I'm now nearly 30. So so I've just come from a very stable environment in that sense. I always knew that I wanted to be in the performing arts career, literally from the moment that I can remember. I didn't necessarily know that's what it was. I just would dance everywhere and just was this very active. I think my parents found it slightly annoying. They were like, "Will you just sit down?" And I was like, "Nope." But yeah, I kind of always knew what I wanted to do career-wise. So I went to a normal state school to the age of 16. Then I auditioned for Tring Park at 16, managed to get a scholarship, and then went there from the age of 16. And that for me was a real shift for many, many reasons. I went from a very grounded, normal, well, what is normal? But like for me at the time, normal background in terms of education in this country to being at a boarding school, essentially. Whilst it's a vocational one, we were boarding in this surrounding that felt like I'd been dropped into the middle of Harry Potter. So if for those people that have never seen it, it's in a Rothschild mansion in the middle of a beautiful town in the Hertfordshire countryside. It's like so unbelievably beautiful, and I can say that now as an adult, but as a 16-year-old kid, when I went there, that kind of went over my head, and I didn't really like
most
see
things
that for what it was. Yeah. So
what,
that changed.
so sorry, just jumping in there. So when you go to 16, is that still college, but you're still boarding when you're 16?
Yeah, so it's still college, but essentially it's 2 years of A levels and then a third year on top. So I did 2 diplomas and 2 A levels while I was there. And then I, in my third year, lived off site. And that was a real sort of shift into, being a bit more independent and sort of learning how to coexist with other young adolescents, shall we say. But the reason that was such a shift to me was because I was from a relatively small town, but I went to a school with lots of people whose parents could afford to send them to that school. So I was on a scholarship, and I've made some of my closest friends for life whilst I was in that place. But it's very interesting when you're not from a world financially, and then suddenly you find yourself in an environment where finances are no option to certain people. And that's a very interesting dynamic to negotiate as a young, like some people had their 18th birthday parties on their tennis courts, for example. And I was like, I don't have a tennis court. I like, do you know what I mean? So it's just a very interesting space to try and find out who you are in. I came out when I went to college. Up until that, I was very much in denial. So that again was another big shift in going from rejecting and suppressing who I was naturally to suddenly being celebrated. And that was probably the best and the most difficult thing for me to negotiate whilst I was at college, for sure. And then I left.
So how quickly was that transition from denial to acceptance for you when you got there?
Probably within 6 months. Wait. Yeah, I'm going to say within 6 months. Like, kind of. Well, it was actually my friend Daisy's birthday when I came out, and her birthday's the 10th of April. So yeah, literally from the start of September.
You know the day that
Yeah,
you came out.
yeah,
I love
yeah,
that.
100%. Like, it's very much planted in my conscious memory for sure.
So was that to peers and friends rather than to like family and friends?
To peers, definitely to
Peers, yeah.
peers, and then I came out to my family a couple of months later. But I came out to peers because somebody in the middle of a party was like, blah blah blah, you're gay, and I literally went, so what if I am? And it was a real like dramatic moment,
Oh,
and yeah,
nice.
just hilarious. And then me and my friends danced on the table to celebrate. It was great. And then I don't know if you've ever seen it, but there's an amazing film called Milk, about the life of Harvey Milk in San Francisco, and
No, I haven't actually.
I watched that film, and it like stirred something within me, and I literally came out to my family the next day, because for me, I felt like the least I could do was be honest about who I was. So that was that moment. And then I left college at 19, and 10 years later, I've been in and out of jobs, and it's been a real roller coaster of emotions, but I feel very lucky to have had the career that I've had, and I feel like I'm stepping into a place of like kind of stability, which is weird saying that coming out of a pandemic. The pandemic for me has been very unstable, but there's been some decisions and some things that I'm involved with in terms of some businesses and things that I feel like are gonna put me in the place where I want to be, is what I'm trying to say. So yeah, that's sort of my through line, very
That's
briefly.
interesting through line when it gets the last 10 years was like 2 sentences.
Yeah, no, that's true. Well, I didn't want to bore everybody with like, I was in this show, and once upon a time I was in this. But very briefly, I started on cruise ships as a dancer. I dabbled a little bit in the creative world, assisting some people. Then I dabbled a little bit more in some fringe work and some musical theatre. Ended up booking Wicked, and then after Wicked, I sort of made a choice to step back into some of the creative stuff and the companies that I'd been working with. Like, I have an amazing relationship with a company called Beyond Repair Dance, soon to be Beyond Repair Entertainment. We're like rebranding and restructuring, but yeah, they've sort of been my most consistent thing throughout my career. I've kind of come and gone with them over 7 years, so they've been a real sort of through line for me, and one that I do not take for granted at all. But is that a little bit less of a 2-sentence?
No, it is. It is. It's just I'm not like there's no right or wrong answer. It's just interesting, People often do that. They go from. It's usually one way or the other. They'll speak a lot about the more recent years and put just their upbringing in a sentence or so, and it's like, wait a minute. But it's hard. Sometimes it's good because it's sometimes hard to put things that we don't talk about all the time into detail. Like when was, I think about it or try to think about it a lot because I like to try and make sure I can answer the questions that I ask to my guests or to a conversation we have in Clubhouse. But I don't think many people actually take the time to reflect on their childhood and how they used to be and how far they've come and the lessons that they've learned. So it's interesting. You said you're finding that stability now and getting to a place where you want to be. Is this a place that you've always known you want to be for a long time, or is it something that's more of a like? Is it newer? Is it a newer like perspective of stepping into whatever it is you want to be now? Has the goal always been the same, or is it ever changing?
Oh, I think the goal is so far from what I ever thought it would be. I think throughout my education and throughout my career, people have always sort of said to me, like, you're a natural sort of leader, or like I've been given opportunities to lead, or like when I was at Tring, I won the Principals Award, for example. I mean, that means nothing now in later life, but like the idea that people always saw me in a role that I didn't necessarily see myself in. Okay. Whereas in the last couple of years, I've gone, oh no, I do know how to manage people, and I do know how to lead, and I do know how to I've now got myself into a position through doing some hard work and some serious grafting where I know how to run a business. So I'm assisting one company with how to run their business, and then the other company that I'm involved in, they give me opportunities to create on a group of dancers, or they give me opportunities to manage a project from start to finish, to budget a project, to do various different things. And if somebody had said to me at any age, oh, you're going to go and be involved in business and you're going to not necessarily be performing all the time, I probably would have told them to F off in no other like phrase, because I never saw that being what was right for me, when actually now that I'm in that position, it feels like it feels like where I'm meant to be, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that does make sense. And I always think that actually that, a lot of performers have a weird, it's a massive duality, that they have confidence in what they do, but then a lack of confidence in themselves in other areas, when in reality they have a lot of transferable skills that make you really valuable assets in business hierarchies, not to mention, communication skills and, breaking down boundaries and all sorts of other things included.
Do you know what it is for me? For me, and it's funny because my brother has a really big corporate job. He's like in that sector, and we have this conversation quite often. I feel like what makes performers great in the world of business, if they're willing to put in the work to understand business, because often performers lead with raw emotion, and that isn't always the best way to run a business. But what performers have had to do in their life is they've had to pull themselves so far apart and put themselves back together that they have far more understanding of people, of emotions, of themselves than maybe some people who have never had to go through that process do. And I think that's what makes performers in business really special, because there's a level of like empathy. There's a level of empathy and a level of understanding that comes from a place of really having to like work your way through those things that they put us through at dance college or at drama school or wherever,
So talk to me about that concept, because I agree with you, I believe, but you feel when you speak about it, it sounds like you feel like you've been through it yourself, and you use like some quite descriptive words there about pulling or tearing yourself apart and putting yourself back together again. What's been your experience of that within the industry or within your career?
So I arrived at college thinking I was going to be this ballet dancer that was going to have this incredible career. And 2 weeks into college, they were like, you're never going to be a ballet dancer. So we're going to move you from the ballet set into the like contemporary jazz set. And at the time I was like, what are you talking about? I don't know what this is. And then whilst you're in those classes for 3 years, you're given certain amounts of feedback that's like, you need to work harder and you need to do this and you need to do, and if you're not going to do that about or change that about yourself, you're not going to get a job. And I don't necessarily agree with that form of education. I think it can be very detrimental to people's mental health. However, for me as an individual, I would not change that experience because it has got me to where I am now, because it built a level of resilience in me that I didn't even know I was physically and mentally capable of, and an endurance to be able to keep going. More so when you start auditioning, I think, you know, the first sort of 2 years when you hear no, or like, you know, I was working, but I was also getting lots of no's, as you know, the industry is a two-sided thing. And I'm sure, like lots of people out there were many days where I was like, I cannot hear another no. Like I can't put myself in that position again. But by doing that, and by being, for want of a better word, rejected, I learned so many things and was forced into other jobs that taught me skills that I would never have learned otherwise.
Yeah.
So like when you're in a hospitality job, serving a table, going, this is not where I want to be in my life, you have so many interactions with people, you have so many experiences, you learn how businesses within hospitality sort of run, and you get an experience or an opportunity to soak up some knowledge. And I feel like that's what's happened to me over the last 10 years, is I've been given opportunities to soak up knowledge. So I freelanced for a fashion company for a bit, and I got to be like a runway manager and a like a backstage manager and all this stuff within the world of fashion that people spend years like sorting after. And I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. But by having that experience, I learned so much about like event production, about event management, about how to coordinate event, and if somebody had gone to me, oh, we're going to send you on a 3-day course, how to learn to be an event manager, I would have been like, no, I'm a dancer, I don't want to do that.
That's what I was about to say. Is that, ironically, the things that have helped and add facets to you as not only as in your career and your employability, but also as a person, and open up your skill set. Ironically, at the time, you probably, just like maybe I would have done, have been a bit more maybe secretive about that you're doing other stuff, because it doesn't want to hinder your image as this one thing. But in hindsight, these are the more actually really valuable. I think probably the attitude to that is changing, hopefully. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, I think so. I definitely think so. And I think also people are realizing there is so much more to life than just the industry, because we've had the industry taken away from us.
Yeah.
And I think that's actually a really beautiful, don't get me wrong, like this year has been difficult for so many reasons. But I think if there's ever silver linings, I think it's the fact that people have had an opportunity to maybe find other things that maybe bring them joy that they weren't willing to necessarily see before.
Yeah, they've been forced into being a more generic creative, right? That could create in all different aspects, and things that we don't think are creative, like starting a business, are actually very creative. So that they're very transferable. And so just to round off that point that you were making, I understand what you were saying, that somebody who's had a clear career path, that is corporate, that knew at college what A levels they needed to do to get, and all they needed to do was jump through very clear hoops, work hard, get the amount of years experience, hit certain goals. They not that it's good or bad or anything like that, but they just know, and their identity is potentially attached to what they do as well. Whereas you learn from a young age, through probably a bit of pain, that that your identity has nothing to do with what you do, or at least specifically which direction you're heading.
Yeah, absolutely, 100. It's funny because somebody said to me the other day, oh, we're all in the same boat. And then someone else was in the conversation, were like, no, we're not in the same boat. We're all in the same storm and everyone's in different boats. And some people are in the water just trying to stay afloat. And some people are partly drowning and some people are on yachts and some people are. And I think what people are starting to realize is everybody has their own sense of struggle or their own sense of strife and their own sense of trauma. But there's a lot that can be gained by experiencing that trauma. And that's not me belittling anybody's experience, because I have a very specific experience being a white man. So I know that I come from a place of privilege. But I feel that if you can get through that trauma and if you can work with a therapist or with somebody, there can be so much gained from coming out the other side of that situation.
Definitely. I think, if I'm applying that to my own life, and then, like you said, from a place of privilege, there's things that I've been through, which could only be seen as negative at the time, and, maybe suppressed trauma, and nothing too crazy, nothing that keeps me up at night, but it's probably, subconsciously opened other doors and avenues and aspects in my life that would never have arisen before it, and like adding to, and these are great experiences, so it's very, very, it's very interesting trying to say that to someone, isn't it? That there's a silver lining to everything. But I guess that's about mindset, and you did mention it. You did mention yourself about, therapy, but you also mentioned earlier on about mental resilience. And that is something we've spoke about that before on some of our conversations about masculine and feminine energy, and that females, for whatever reason, we could go really deep in why they tend, generalizing, always have to generalize to have a conversation, but females tend to have such great mental resilience inherently. So there might be a reason why that is. And I'm not a philosopher, so I'm not sure why societally that they tend to have better than us. I don't know if you have any ideas.
I think, well, funny enough, I don't know if she's still here, but Kaylee O'Connor popped up and she spoke to both of us. I think you were in the room at the time when she told us about the women say something like on average 25,000 words a day or something, and men say 7,000 or something. Yeah, something like that. I can't remember the exact figures, so don't quote me on it. But I find that fascinating, and I think that's what I love about what you're doing here, encouraging men to have conversations. Part of it is because women are willing to speak and men aren't willing to speak. So therefore, I think they have a stronger mental resilience because they actually articulate their thoughts in words. Whereas men maybe don't do that. I think we're actually encouraged not to do that. I think society has, I know for me, I was, as a queer boy growing up, encouraged, not specifically by my family. I was very lucky, as I've said already, but in the education system, not to get upset about things, not to cry, not to... I remember, this is actually awful when I think about it now, but I was in year 8 and I remember my form tutor, we were on a week, when you join a new secondary school, well, my secondary school did these like weekends away, and like 3 form groups would go away together as like, team bonding and whatever. And I remember at this weekend away, my form tutor essentially outed me. But at the time, I was so in denial and not even aware, like being a 14, 13-year-old boy, like not even aware what. I was so confused. And like he gave me a massive apology in private, but like even just that experience of like I wasn't allowed to be effeminate in a certain space, or like I wasn't allowed to be in touch with my emotion because somebody older who was also a man deemed it to be a certain thing. I've never actually said that out loud. This is good. This is very good. But like, it suddenly just came to my brain. I was like, oh my God, like as men, we're just constantly told, you know, just to suppress things and not feel, you know?
Yeah, I think, that just makes me think about, we try our best. It's not always easy to not put too much blame around. People have to be accountable for their actions, of course.
Mm-hmm.
People need to know when they're in the wrong. People can only be in the wrong once they do speak and be in the wrong. So I've got a question for you in a second, so remind me of that. But when this teacher has probably been socially conditioned and told to not speak himself, told to what it's like to be a man, to feel threatened by anything, seeing a man not in the stereotype that he thinks and sees. There's all these. The reason I bring that up, not to defend him, but I think it can only get better. I think the work
Absolutely.
the work that we do, and forcing, I call our generation, the millennials, is like the transition generation for who didn't have the internet and now do. So they know what it's like on both sides of things, and anyone who now any generation now, Gen Z or younger, they're always going to have the internet in their life. They're always going to have their eyes opened, and obviously there's the cons that come with that. So I think that can only get better, but we have to do the hard work. I think that we have to do the hard work to pave that way and to make sure that everything's okay for the future. But yeah, man, thank you for sharing that.
No, yeah, it's fascinating. And I don't really harbor any sort of resentment towards that individual. I hasn't really acknowledged it, I guess. But I think what's interesting having this conversation is I can totally see and respect where he was coming from in that moment. And I think that's something that maybe we don't always take the time to do, especially when we're in the middle of something or we're in a passionate moment. It's like, it's all coming from like here rather than from a place of like stepping back and going, okay, why is this maybe happening,
Yeah, and that's, oh God, there's so much to delve into here, but first and foremost, this is why it's so good to talk, because we're now reflecting back on experiences that we've had, and we're talking and uncovering these moments that you don't realize that you carry around with you sometimes, and you get to talk about them and unpack them a little bit. This, like, I'm not a trained professional, neither are you. There's no substitute.
Yeah, this is not a therapy 101.
No, it's not a substitute for therapy, but the more that we can talk about everything, the less that we might need therapy to talk about things that are like, I don't want to coin a term, but just like micro traumas and things that are like pivotal. So we can get them out. I think that conversation can only be good in that sense. But yeah, what you spoke about about being put into that position, not seeing it yourself, but now growing into it, and having negative experiences of people of authority around you. What do you now think, in your opinion, what makes a good leader?
Wow, big question. What makes a good leader? somebody that is clear, somebody that is oh, Kaylee, that's so kind, thank you.
To anyone who's listening, we had a comment from Kaylee saying, "You're so brilliant at reflecting and not reacting through all of your beautiful growth, Daniel." And that is, while you think about what makes a great leader, I just say that that's why, anything that practice mindfulness, you spoke and you showed this very visceral, physical representation of how it feels to speak, and you hear something and you just speak without thinking. The more we can extend that moment and ask ourselves questions, I love asking questions, and I've really connected to that, from my childhood. I was a very curious child, and I'm reconnecting to that as an adult now, and felt like I didn't have permission. You feel like you can't say anything because you don't want to be wrong. But now I encourage myself to be wrong and ask myself questions. And that moment, that mindfulness, the more we can stretch that out and be less reactive, can only be a good thing, which you're clearly doing good at. You've got a positive.
Well, that's very kind. I appreciate that a lot. I'm going to answer your question. Well, I'm going to attempt to answer your question.
Good.
What makes a good leader? So I think somebody that shows empathy, somebody that is willing to be wrong. I think you have to be able to hear when you're leading. You have to be able to be open to the idea that maybe your idea isn't necessarily the best idea. I think that's a really important quality in leaders. But I also think strength and encouragement and passion. I feel like whenever I've wanted to get behind somebody, it's because I believe in what they're saying, or they have a passion for what they're trying to achieve. So for me, in the positions that I've been in terms of leadership, communication, I think actually creating a space where there is a communication and not just I'm here to lead and you're going to listen. Because we've all been in those jobs where people are literally like, do this, do that, and you're literally like, oh my god, shut up already. But and don't get me wrong, I did a job at 21 where I was a dance captain, and recently we had a catch-up Zoom. This is 7-8 years later now, and I'm not gonna lie, I wasn't very good at the job. At the time, at 21, I thought I was smashing it, and then looking back on it, it's oh good god, I did not lead with any of the things that I've just spoken about. I led from a point of borderline dictatorship. It was you will do what I say because I've been given this job kind of vibes.
I think the same thing to some of the things I've done in the past. I think that I've spoke about it a lot. I taught a professional college for 5 years, and I felt like I learned what it was like to be an authoritative figure. And I tried to emulate that when I could have done a much better job at connecting. And when you were speaking, it helped me, align or reorganize some thoughts in my own head. What I think about leadership also. I think you gave a great answer. Definitely. I agree with everything that you said. But, within all that, a leader still has to make decisions, right? So
yeah, absolutely.
So I think what makes a great leader is somebody who's well balanced themselves, who've got, when we spoke about before, your to describe the qualities that you have, whether you want to call them masculine or feminine, right brain, left brain, yin, yang, whatever it is, but being able to see everyone as an individual, and that they all have different needs and wants and different ideas, but then you're trying to take, more often than not in a leadership position, you're trying to take all these individuals in one direction. So how do you see that?
Absolutely.
How do you see them all at the same time as individuals, but then you still have to have the decision-making skills to make a decision that's going to be the best for everyone,
Absolutely.
that into consideration.
And also sometimes you just have to be decisive in the moment. Like, I've been on events where, I arrived in Paris on a job. No, sorry, in Monaco on a job, and the French team hadn't done half of the work that needed to be done. So when the English team arrived, we were like, okay, we've got no time and a hell of a lot of work to do. So you just have to be decisive in that moment to try and problem solve. And I think one of the things that I'm very good at outside of being a performer, because in a performer context, I find that a bit of a different situation, but I'm kind of unflappable when I'm in that position. But as a performer, I don't feel unflappable. I feel like I sometimes get myself in these situations where I'm like, and that comes from a pressure and various other things. But within leadership off stage, I don't know, there's just like a zone that I switch into, and like you could tell me that you could tell me that I like, true story, we were on a job in Myanmar and the building was like leaking backstage and the like electrics were being like dripped on and various other things were just going wrong. But in that moment we were all just like, no, there's a job to do, let's get it done. Like at one point there was like fish curry being made in like the stage left wing, and I was like, culturally I was like, this is such a shock to the system, but we're here to do a job and we have X amount of time to execute that job. So yeah, I do feel like I'm quite an unflappable person in certain scenarios, and I feel like that is why I potentially succeed or thrive in some of those environments. Other situations, not so much, but in a professional environment, yes, I think that's something that I've learned. I've not always been good at it, but I've learned for sure.
Yeah, that would make a lot of sense of why that helps in leadership, I think. I also mentioned about asking you a question and not being afraid to ask questions to be wrong. And you mentioned it earlier. And I think I know the answer, but I kind of like forget a little bit. And I've Googled it a couple of times. But, from all my privilege that I am as a, white, cis, straight male, could you talk me through the difference between queer and homosexual?
Yes, however,
and the ownership of the word and like,
I definitely
might be subjective.
I definitely can. However, I need to put a disclaimer on the front of it that not everybody that identifies as a homosexual uses the word queer. And also not everybody within the LGBT community finds the word queer an appropriate word to use. It's one of those words.
I've seen it a lot. I've seen it a lot more recently, and especially females using it. Females who are, whether they're bisexual or potentially straight, using queer as well. So it's been a little bit confusing. That's why I thought I knew what it meant, and then now I'm a bit confused. So
it's one of those words that sort of has been reclaimed in the last few years, and I still to this day don't know if I should be using it, but then I also feel like I kind of semi-identify with the idea of being queer, and
the words just in general. We've spoke about this at one of our previous conversations, haven't we? About reclaiming words and ownership of words, how powerful words can be. And I can, from my neutral standpoint, not being attached to the word, I've definitely, through my childhood heard it weaponized, but then I've also now more recently in recent years felt it and like also agree with it as a celebratory word as well. So is there a specific is it specifically grouped to a? Sorry, is it specifically attached to a group of people?
So
Logistically.
the word itself is there to describe like sexual. Right, I'm just going to read you the actual
Yes, thank you.
because I feel like that way it's just easier. I'm not trying to say something.
I'm not trying to put you on the spot, by the way.
Yeah, no, it's fine. So queer is a word that describes sexual and gender identities other than straight and cisgender people. So lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people may all identify with the word queer. So being cisgendered, just in case somebody doesn't know what being cisgendered is, being cisgendered is identifying with the gender that you are assigned at birth. So when the doctor takes you and goes, oh, this is your genitalia, therefore this is your gender. So I am cisgender, I identify as male, and I have always identified with that gender that I was assigned with. So that makes me cisgender.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So queer is used by people who don't necessarily identify with the gender that they were assigned with at birth, but it's also used by many homosexuals, lesbians, bis, and transgender people. To me, I use it with reference to the fact that sometimes I love to go out in a pair of heels and a crop top. I'm not going to lie about it. People have seen me in London many times. I don't necessarily align with the gender of clothing and the structure that comes with that. So therefore I identify with a slight not misgender, that's the wrong word to use, but maybe I push the gender spectrum a little bit.
Yeah,
but I identify
that makes sense. That's helping me understand it as well. As in, it's quite an umbrella term that covers a lot of bases. If we're using it, in a celebratory way,
it has a history that is not so positive as well. I just need to point that out as well. It has it's a word that's been used in a very discriminative manner in the past between specific eras of history. So along with the words I don't ever use this word, but I'm just going to say it for the point of this video. The words faggot, queer, they've often been used as very discriminative, negative remarks towards the community, which is why some people within the LGBTQIA community, intersectionality with age sometimes don't celebrate the word being used, and I completely respect that because they have their own relationship. But as we spoke a few weeks ago about swearing, there is power in language, and there is power in reclaiming certain aspects of that language too. So I feel like we could talk about this for hours.
Definitely.
Hopefully what I've said has some clarity to it.
Yeah, that's helpful. And for you specifically, just so I make sure I understand, is when you use the term queer, if you're referring to yourself, it's that aspect of, when it comes to clothing and gender, pushing those boundaries, and but you still identify as cis because even if you're wearing skirt and heels, they don't belong to a gender. They're just an item of clothing that has been fictionalized, and made up. And so you don't ever claim to not being a man in heels and a skirt.
Yeah,
because that's 100%. What it is.
100%. And I feel like I don't personally know what Billy Porter's gender identity is. I don't know whether they align as they, he, she. I don't know what that is. But for example, when they went to the Oscars in that incredible dress, and that's all everybody could talk about. The idea that society has created gender, it's created the construct, and it's created women should shave their armpits and shave their legs and wear this, and men should do this and do that. And that's the bit for me that, I just don't, I'm like, cool, if I just want to wear everything else that is defined as masculine clothing, but walk around in a pair of heels, I'm going to do it because I don't really care.
Yeah, for sure.
You know,
and the thing is with that as well, you know, we spoke about how like going through difficult times and things in your life can have a positive effect, and you can take ownership of it later on and bring opportunity later on. We also should never give judgment, in my opinion, and I don't know if you agree with this, but like things, having awareness and knowing that there's been some societal sculpture of your personality and the reason why you enjoy things doesn't mean you shouldn't enjoy them. So if I'm a straight male and I, you know, have been influenced by society to enjoy, you know, watching sports that are like violent, doesn't mean that I can't enjoy them because I know that I've been pushed in that direction, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it comes down to like being respectful of other, and I say this because I know I can say this to you, and because we've had so many conversations in the past, and I know that you are the first person to be like, I want to learn more. Yeah. But that comes from a place of respect, and you always come from a place of respect. And unfortunately, there are just lots of people out there that don't. So I just want to say thank you, and I appreciate the fact that you are always very respectful around any aspect that you want to grow from or learn more about. And like I said before, I also am in a massive place of privilege because, yes, I might identify as a homosexual, but that's really the only thing that I don't have a place of privilege from. Does that make sense?
Ginger hair as well.
Oh yeah, being ginger definitely.
Sometimes, so weirdly, I don't know why a random color. I think it's probably because it's the rarest hair color, right?
I don't really
got a bit of stick at some point in society.
Yeah, no,
maybe more children, more just children playground. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Yeah,
I always bring this up on Clubhouse, and in my Clubhouse profile it says naturally ginger, because I'm like, I spent my entire childhood people taking the piss out of me for my hair color, and then you get to a certain age and everybody wants to pay to have that. Well, actually, not everybody. Lots of women want to pay to have their hair dyed that color, and sometimes men too, and sometimes people that are non-binary and everything in between. But yeah, it's just fascinating to me that suddenly there's a turning point and suddenly everyone's like, oh, I want to have red hair. It's like,
you don't get to own that. You didn't go through the struggle of having it, you know, through childhood. Yeah, I get that as well. That's good. But that kind of, you know, rounds up the conversation, at least to the point of I spoke to you about this before as well, about I want to do a series on Clubhouse about this sort of thing, educating, you know, and I'm generalizing and stereotyping, but I think that, you know, from my own position, straight males know a lot less about these sorts of things than you know, but when it comes to everything, and we'll all admit that there's areas of you know, marginalized groups or whatever it is, or struggles, whether it's disability or experiences that we don't know a lot about, and the only way to grow as people is to ask and find out. And so I do want to do find a way to phrase it and frame it, because I think that's the more I'm learning about these conversations, it's really to make people hear that and listen, that it has to be framed in the right way. But I'm very excited to do that soon.
So to me, like Raffaella Covino at Applause for Thought puts it best across like the entire spectrum, like education equals prevention. So unless people are educated about any of these subjects, about any of these things, about any of the microaggressions that they may be delivering to people subconsciously or through systemic raising, without that education, how can we prevent it in the future? Can we prevent it in the future? Possibly not. I feel like that education has to come first, and that's why I think these conversations and these things are really important. And I'm not that she owns that statement, but like she kind of put it out there first for me, so I always refer back to her when I say it. But it's one of the things that I really try and live my life by, and I have so many things to still work on, to still learn, to still acknowledge, to still, from certain stigmas to certain biases to certain things. And I think everybody does, but I think as long as you're acknowledging that and willing to put in the work and are actively putting in work and not just doing things for the sake of being seen to be doing them, then I think that's a massive step in the right direction for all of us. Wow, I sound like a real sort of I don't know what I sound like right now, but you know where I'm coming from.
I'm asking you the questions, mate. You're answering them. It's all very apt and relevant. So I appreciate your thoughts and vocalizing it. It's just I don't know. This is one of my things. Is I think it's really important. We've had conversations and agree with it. I don't know how to rally more people. I don't want to be pushy. I'm the least pushy person when it comes to. I think people, will do these things in their own time, and we'll find it when it's the right time for them. But I don't know. Do we need a trailer or something, or to market it of how nutritional and feel good these conversations can be? And especially being in a safe space where you can be wrong it's liberating. I think.
Yeah, 100%. Being allowed to be wrong and to be able to be corrected or to be able to be explained, allow yourself to hear why that may be not the case, is a really powerful thing. But that comes for me from a place of ego. And until you're willing to let that guard or that ego or that thing down a little bit, it's really hard to hear what the other person's saying. And we talk about, in mental health first aid, they talk about non-judgmental listening. And I know that you've got is it the 6 steps of listening or the 7 steps?
Five levels of listening, yeah.
I just don't think we talk about that enough as a society. I don't think people really know how to listen to each other because everybody's too busy waiting to come back with their next response or their next point that they want to make.
Which admittedly I do a bit when I'm hosting mental health because
that's a different. You're trying to facilitate a conversation. Yeah.
But at least we're aware of it, and I just wanted to wrap up things full circle in the sense of potentially it's just a thought that came to my mind as you were talking again. So thank you for inspiring lots of new thought in me. Is that maybe that we have as an adults we don't want to deal with learning and growing and being told that we're wrong because of the experience we've had from leaders and authoritarian figures in the past, because it was never we were never told, we never learned that something was wrong by somebody asking us questions and us figuring out why that might be wrong or how it might make someone feel or why that there's a better way to do things if we think of something more logically. And I don't know, but to me it makes sense that people have got bad experiences with why does being wrong have to be negative? It should actually be. It's a place of growth, isn't it?
I think this is where I was really lucky growing up. Like I said, I grew up under 2 teachers, so I was never just told, don't do that, that's wrong. I was always explained as to why that may be wrong, or to consider how the other person may feel. Even from a very young age, my mum would say things to me like, but how do you think that makes them feel? Or things like that. And I think that's a really amazing experience that I got to have growing up. But then I got to do that to my parents when I came out, because I grew up in a house where, my mum was a devout Christian and she is an amazing woman and I'm very lucky to have her, but she really struggled with me initially coming out. And then that was my opportunity to go, no, I'm really sorry, but you're wrong. And that doesn't mean I love you any less, but I just need to explain to you why maybe you're wrong. And I think people if you can take the time to cut, I think the part of the issue is we live in a world where everybody's so quick to attack. And
yeah, especially when you look on Twitter or somewhere like that. Fuck
yeah, oh yeah, 100%. But like the thing is, coming from a place, and I used to do this, I literally used to do this. I used to be in situations where somebody would say something inappropriate and I'd be like, you can't say that because X, Y, and Z and blah, 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 blah. Now I would never dream of like talking to somebody on that level, because it immediately creates this, and then nobody can get through. Like nothing can get through that space whatsoever. So like I'm still just as passionate as I've always been, but the approach is just very different.
Just the experience and the smarts, mate. You know that sometimes if somebody says something wrong as well, you simply sometimes just get them to repeat themselves, and they hear themselves say it again, and they go, "Oh," you know, they realise that things are problematic potentially.
Can we also just acknowledge this little corner that you've got yourself set up in?
Oh, this is all for sure, mate. It's not. It is real. It's not quite a screen, but it's my friend's house, so I don't own or have not read any of these books. So there's a disclaimer.
No, I was literally like, how very profound. We're in the like reading corner.
Yeah, exactly. It's the library, all the thoughts. But we've hit the hour mark, mate, and I just want to just say thanks again for not only, you know, this hour that you give, but you know, the weekly talks we've been doing on Clubhouse, and you've been rallying people to join and recommending it also. And I've been having some great conversations there, so I just wanted a chance to show how grateful I am.
Also, if anyone out there wants invites to Clubhouse, Elliot and I have got loads between us, so feel free to come and join the conversations. You will be addicted for a while, but once you get through that, you get your life back.
Talking to somebody who's in remission, you know.
Yeah, exactly. I've been really good the last few days. I've spent far less time on there, but it is really addictive. But also, it's like a great space for community. It's a great, like, if anybody out there feels very isolated and feels like nobody around them really understands their specific individual experience, there's probably a space for you on Clubhouse where somebody will have some sort of commonality or at least an experience that they're willing to share, for sure.
Agreed. What a great advocation. Is that a word? Maybe it is now, for Clubhouse. Dan, thank you, mate. Lots of love. And I'll chat to you tomorrow.
Yeah, you too, buddy. I will see you tomorrow. I look forward to whatever the topic of conversation is, but I will be there. Oh, thanks, I'm going out for dinner with some friends. I will try and be there.
Maybe, yeah. Maybe. No worries. You deserve a week off anyway.
Cheers, buddy. Thank you so much for having me here today. And yeah, keep doing what you're doing because it's super important. It's great.
Thanks, brother. All right. Lots of love.
No
bye, everyone.
Lots of love.
Thanks for joining.
I'll speak to you soon.